I nearly kept this conversation private because the truth sounds so extreme I worried you'd dismiss it entirely. Imagine a Walmart store manager taking you aside and quietly revealing that 7 everyday foods are poised to triple in cost. I recognize how that lands. It feels like sensational noise you'd flick past without a second thought. But let me tell you about Dave. 8 months ago, he murmured a quiet warning about certain canned staples climbing before the year closed. I stocked up that same week. 3 months later, the register confirmed exactly what he predicted. Half a year ago, he flagged specific cooking oils vanishing from inventory. I grabbed 4 extra containers. 2 months later, my spouse found a restriction notice taped above a nearly barren shelf. His track record is precise, and his information has proven solid repeatedly. So last Tuesday, when he motioned subtly toward the storage area, I abandoned my cart and pursued him without hesitation. What he disclosed in the next 4 minutes is what I'm laying out right now. 7 grocery categories, verified cost projections, a real timeline, and a narrowing opportunity that most households have not yet detected. Let's start with coffee. When Dave led with coffee, I simply acknowledged the ongoing pain I'd already noticed. Then he delivered a statement that halted my breathing. He explained that the amount leaving your wallet today reflects old contracts cycling out. The fresh pricing architecture is already cemented behind closed doors. The paper sticker simply hasn't updated yet. Pause and genuinely absorb that reality. The verdict is final. What scans at the register currently is a ghost of agreements dissolving this very moment. Consider the verified data behind Dave's internal memos. Coffee costs have already surged beyond 20% in a single 12-month span. Roughly 4/5 of the morning brew Americans consume originates abroad. We cultivate virtually zero beans domestically. Brazil alone dispatches nearly 40% of the planet's total coffee supply. Brazilian exports now face a 50% surcharge entering the United States. That financial burden does not dissolve magically mid-journey. It cascades downward, hammering roasters, then logistics, then store shelves, and ultimately your receipt. My neighbor Gloria, who drinks 3 or 4 mugs daily, chuckled when I relayed Dave's message and insisted she'd pivot to the discount label. I responded that the budget can is climbing identically because every brand sources from the same distressed regions. There exists no bargain roast immune to 80% import dependency combined with a 50% Brazil-specific surcharge. The generic tin and the artisanal pouch are both ascending. The sole variable is when the adhesive label finally flips. She stopped laughing immediately. Today's rate hovers between $8 and $12 per package. Dave's mid-year forecast places it at $14 to $20 per bag conservatively. Purchase your standard coffee in the bulkiest format on display. Whole roasted beans preserve freshness far longer than pre-ground powder. Seal them in an opaque container distanced from warmth and sunlight. For truly extended preservation, vacuum seal modest weekly rations. They endure for months without flavor degradation. You don't require a stockpile bunker, you need merely 4 to 6 supplemental weeks of your existing habit. Secure it at the present cost before the updated placard materializes. And if coffee rattled your assumptions, brace yourself for what's unfolding with ground beef. This item is already shifting inside live data streams, and the majority of shoppers remain completely oblivious. When Dave pivoted to ground beef, I actually resisted mildly. I questioned whether beef perpetually rises and if this moment truly differed from any prior year. He countered that this situation is foundational, not a fleeting harvest hiccup or supply blip. It's a pipeline fracture requiring several years to mend. Then he unpacked the cattle population crisis, and I need to articulate it precisely as he illustrated it. During 2022, a punishing extended drought scorched cattle territory across the southern plains. Feed expenditures soared to thresholds ranchers economically could not absorb. So they executed the brutal arithmetic forced upon them and liquidated their herds prematurely. Wholesale sell-off? Hundreds of thousands of animals flooded slaughterhouses in 2022 and 2023 because sustaining them exceeded the revenue from selling them. Here lies the buried detail that escapes headlines. Bovine populations cannot regenerate swiftly. A calf demands years to mature to slaughter weight. The mother cows culled in 2022 are absent to birth offspring. The calves destined for birth in 2023 simply never existed. The livestock intended to populate supermarket beef cases currently were never reared. That shortage gap in the production chain is irreversible until natural biological cycles restore herd counts. That process consumes years, not seasons, literal years. Ground beef figures are already elevated 19% since January of this year. Dave noted that beef represents a category where store leadership has already received directives to manage buyer expectations regarding sticker shock and scarcity. When I pressed for clarification, he translated it bluntly. Act unsurprised when the leap materializes, and refrain from promising shoppers that relief is pending. My brother-in-law prepares ground beef 4 evenings weekly for a bustling household of 5. I phoned him the night following this exchange and conveyed everything. He dismissed it as theatrical anxiety. I methodically walked him through Dave's explanation of the herd deficit. He purchased 25 pounds the following morning, distributed across 2 separate retailers. Current pricing sits between $5.50 and $7 per pound. Dave's June forecast indicates $8 to $10 per pound, perhaps steeper on select cuts. Ground chuck freezes nearly flawlessly. Purchase family-sized trays and divide them personally before freezing. Flatten the portions for efficient stacking and rapid thawing. What you freeze today at today's valuation retains today's valuation when June's shelf marker reads 40% higher. This represents the simplest, most immediate safeguard on this entire register. Now, the next entry genuinely frustrated me when Dave raised it, because it's a product universally assumed to be corrected, and it absolutely remains unresolved. Eggs. When Dave placed eggs on the list, I audibly questioned the inclusion. I believed egg prices were retreating. He met my gaze and asked, "Retreating to what, precisely?" I had no coherent reply, because here is the suppressed statistic nobody reiterates, yet every household deserves to hear weekly. In March of 2020, a dozen eggs cost $1.50. Today, following the supposed normalization, following the price dips everyone celebrated, you're shelling out 3 to 4 times that figure. 3 to 4 multiples. What pundits label a recovery remains 3 to 4 multiples above the 2020 baseline. That isn't recovery. That's a newly installed, permanently elevated floor that society has silently accepted as standard. And the catalyst behind the original surge, avian influenza, has not vanished. It lurks in a dormant interval. It struck in 2 previous pulses. The first wave crashed in 2022. The second pummeled in 2024. Each episode followed an identical blueprint. Silent lull, then eruption, then mass flock eradication, then vacant coolers, then customer purchase limits of 1 or 2 cartons, then prices rocketing to genuinely staggering altitudes. Specialists aren't debating whether a third wave triggers, they're debating its arrival date and severity. Dave confessed that eggs represent the commodity corporate headquarters monitors more intensely than any other floor item. It's the most politically charged grocery staple in the nation. Every household purchases them, and every household instantly registers the cost shift. This guarantees that when the next surge arrives, shelves will empty faster than previously because the public will panic buy instantly based on vivid memory. Here's practical knowledge most consumers lack. You can freeze eggs. Not encased in their shells, of course. Crack them, whisk them lightly, pour the liquid into an ice cube mold, freeze solidly, then transfer the cubes to a sealed freezer pouch. Each cube approximates 1 whole egg. They maintain quality for up to a year and perform superbly in scrambled dishes, omelets, and any baked goods. It feels peculiar until you're staring at a cooler sporting a 2-carton restriction and an $8 sticker. Present cost runs $4 to $6 per dozen based on region. Dave's mid-year forecast positions them at $7 to $10 per dozen if another pathogenic wave strikes, an occurrence he views as probable before summer. Item number 4 is one Dave says most households completely overlook, and the supplier correspondence he described made the upcoming surge feel sudden, despite decisions being finalized months prior. Olive oil. Frankly, I challenged this item harder than any other. I argued that consumers can simply substitute an alternative fat if olive oil escalates. Vegetable oil, canola, anything cheaper. He calmly suggested I pull up sunflower oil pricing on my device immediately. Then coconut oil. Then avocado oil. I complied, and every single alternative charted in the identical upward trajectory. The reasoning is stark. A primary Italian food importer, servicing major retail chains including Walmart, has formally transmitted written confirmation of a 20% foundational price increase on olive oil. That is solidified, already embedded in the distribution channel, already contractually acknowledged. That constitutes merely the baseline before European goods tariffs pile supplementary costs atop every bottle originating from Spain, Italy, and Greece. These three nations collectively supply the overwhelming majority of the globe's olive oil. All three have suffered successive years of severe drought and scorching heat waves that damaged groves at a magnitude that cannot self-correct in a single favorable growing period. Olive trees possess remarkable resilience, cultivated for millennia. But consecutive failed harvests don't merely reduce immediate yield. They structurally weaken the trees. Restoration is measured in years, not months. Dave categorized olive oil as one of his early warning email commodities. When I questioned the meaning, he detailed that before any public pricing adjustment, hushed electronic notices circulate from vendors to the procurement division. Not glossy press statements, nothing that would tip off the end buyer, solely an internal memo signaling substantial upcoming alterations to the cost foundation. Olive oil has been accumulating these notices since last autumn. My wife uses olive oil daily. When I returned home that Tuesday evening and relayed Dave's assessment, she walked directly to our pantry and retrieved the bottle. She examined the price I'd scribbled on the base with a marker when we purchased it, a personal habit I adopted roughly a year ago to monitor fluctuations. She paused thoughtfully, then noted it already sat higher than her recollection of previous purchases. Indeed, it already does, and substantially greater movement remains ahead. Current pricing spans $9 to $14 per bottle depending on volume and label. Dave's mid-year projection places it at $15 to $22 per bottle, with premium labels potentially loftier. Secure the large format dark glass vessels, never the clear ones. Transparent glass permits light to degrade the oil prematurely. Position it in a cool, shadowed cupboard. An unopened container stored correctly retains integrity for 18 to 24 months effortlessly. 2 or 3 supplementary bottles acquired today isn't crisis hoarding. It's simply purchasing ahead of a supplier-confirmed, corporate-acknowledged increase already bolted into the back end. Number 5 is the moment Dave's entire demeanor shifted noticeably. His volume dropped, and when I later asked why this item felt distinct, his reply has lingered with me ever since. Orange juice and fresh fruit. Dave confided that this category batters families with children most severely, and he knows precisely what's approaching on the pricing front, yet he's powerless to intervene. That's a weighty admission from someone who dedicates every single day to serving his community. Orange juice prices have already swelled 20% since January of this year. Yet that lone figure fails to capture the profound structural decay beneath the surface. This isn't a transient supply disruption. This isn't a lousy harvest. This is the terminal consequence of a decade's worth of compounding calamities decimating America's domestic citrus infrastructure. Florida, historically the heartland of American citrus, the domestic shock absorber that prevented wild import cost swings, has essentially vanished as a meaningful production source. Citrus greening bacterium, successive devastating hurricanes, soil degradation, persistent flooding. Florida's orange juice output now wallows at its lowest point in over 5 decades. That's not a short-term dip. That's an obliterated agricultural sector that will not revive on any timeline that aids you by June 2026. Consequently, we now operate nearly entirely dependent on imported fruit. Roughly 59% of all fresh fruit consumed within the United States arrives from abroad. When surcharge expenses on imported goods escalate, and they've risen substantially across multiple critical trade relationships this year, there exists zero domestic pathway to redirect the burden. The buffer was Florida, and Florida is functionally gone. I thought of my own young daughter when Dave shared this. She's 7. She drinks a glass of orange juice every single sunrise. She doesn't comprehend what a tariff represents or what citrus disease signifies. She simply knows she enjoys the taste. And I'm acutely aware that what I'm paying currently is a price that will be obsolete by June. Present cost runs $4 to $6 per half gallon of orange juice. Dave's June forecast indicates $7 to $9 per half gallon. Fresh fruit broadly has swelled 30 to 50% across most imported varieties. Frozen concentrated orange juice constitutes your pragmatic alternative. It's cheaper than ready to pour, stores conveniently in your freezer, lasts beyond a year, and tastes indistinguishable when reconstituted properly. Regarding fresh fruit generally, berries freeze beautifully and retain nearly complete nutritional value. Purchase when costs dip and freeze whatever you can spare. Our grandparents executed this automatically as routine household management. Most of our generation simply misplaced the habit. Number 6 is the category Dave admitted startled even him when he began scrutinizing the internal projections. He labeled it the most disquieting sector to examine, and the moment he elaborated, I grasped precisely why. Seafood and frozen fish. When Dave arrived at this entry, he hesitated briefly before continuing. Then he stated plainly that this is the section where the internal figures are the most uncomfortable to absorb. I've been contemplating that phrase ever since. The most uncomfortable to absorb. Spoken by a man who analyzes supply and pricing intelligence every single week across 6 years. I challenged this one too, noting that seafood registers as a premium purchase. Most households aren't buying lobster weekly, so why does this crack his essential 7? He clarified he wasn't referencing luxury shellfish. He was referencing the frozen tilapia fillets, the fish sticks, the tinned tuna, the mundane items ordinary families toss into carts weekly without deliberation. Frozen seafood costs have already climbed 11.6% this year. The structural arithmetic behind this category is the most unforgiving on this entire compilation. Around 80% of the seafood Americans consume is imported. The chief sources are China, Vietnam, and Chile, all now confronting substantially elevated surcharges when shipping into the United States. What renders this distinct from beef, where at minimum a domestic cattle industry exists capable of theoretical reconstruction over time, is stark. There is no domestic seafood production able to scale and fill the import vacuum. The ocean does not react to marketplace incentives. You cannot simply opt to manufacture more wild-caught fish the way you can opt to breed more cattle. When surcharge costs inflate on imported seafood, no alternative supply source materializes. The expense migrates directly, unmediated, to the price tag. No shock absorber, no backup channel, no domestic surplus held in reserve. Dave revealed he's already tracking this in his own store's procurement metrics. He noted the assortment in the frozen fish aisle is contracting. The less popular species are disappearing first. The staple offerings persist, but inventory depth is thinner than any time in 2 years, and the costing on even these core products is currently being refreshed behind the scenes. A close friend of mine, tight since college, raising 5 kids, serves his household fish 3 nights weekly specifically because it undercuts beef pricing and his children will actually consume it. When I told him about this, he asked what practical steps to take. I offered him the identical guidance I'm extending now. Current pricing runs $1.50 to $2.50 per can of tuna or salmon. Frozen fillets span $5 to $9 per pound. Dave's mid-year projection places canned fish at $3 to $4.50 per can, and frozen fish between $9 and $14 per pound. Shift your purchasing emphasis toward shelf-stable canned seafood immediately, before the frozen section mirrors what's already been decided. Tinned tuna, tinned salmon, sardines, Identical protein, a fraction of the outlay. Shelf longevity is measured in years, not days. Not glamorous, but strategically brilliant. When June arrives and the freezer aisle appears starkly different than its current form, you'll feel relief that you moved early. Number 7. Dave volunteered this final category unprompted. We were concluding, and I assumed the discussion had wrapped, when he added, "There's one more, and this one matters profoundly because it permeates every family's grocery basket every single week. Packaged and processed foods." He insisted there's an additional layer, and it outweighs the others because it isn't a single product. It's everything encased in a box, a pouch, a can, or a wrapper. It's the breakfast cereal your kids demolish, the crackers resting on your counter, the pasta sauce you deploy twice weekly, the soup cans lining your pantry. Let me read you something genuine, not hearsay, not fringe speculation. An actual public declaration from Walmart's own CEO, Doug McMillon, delivered at a Morgan Stanley investor conference, warned processed food costs are unlikely to retreat to pre-pandemic levels. He said prices may not descend substantially during the course of this coming year. The executive overseeing America's largest retailer informed shareholders and by extension every single one of us that processed food pricing is not returning downward. He also stated food costs are already elevated 30% since the pandemic's onset. What he's communicating is the new baseline sits 30% above the old baseline, and from that new plateau, prices continue climbing. He illuminated how the compounding mechanism works in ways most shoppers never perceive. Everyone fixates on the edible ingredient inside the packaging, but that's merely one component. You've got the aluminum for the can, the cardboard for the carton, the polymer for the wrapper, the ink on the label, the fuel in the delivery truck, and the wages of the warehouse worker who offloaded it. Every solitary one of those inputs is currently trending in the identical direction, and every solitary one eventually lands squarely on the consumer. Then he described something that made my stomach clench: shrinkflation. The container shrinks subtly while the price holds steady or edges upward slightly. On the shelf, it avoids triggering alarm, and nothing visually screams for your attention. But inside your kitchen, the cereal box empties twice as rapidly, and the chip bag is depleted before the game concludes. The soup can barely covers one bowl instead of nearly two. His store's SKU data illustrates it unmistakably. Package weights are dropping, and the actual cost per unit is climbing. The vast majority of customers never detect it unless they are specifically monitoring for it. He said the individuals paying close attention are furious, and the individuals not scrutinizing feel perpetually baffled. That confusion is not accidental, and it is accelerating aggressively right now. Current pricing varies wildly by product, with projected increases of 25 to 40% across many categories. Walmart's CEO has already confirmed these prices are not ever returning downward. The tactical move is straightforward. Examine what your household genuinely cycles through every single week. Secure 2 months' worth of those exact items right now at today's valuation. We'd been positioned near the rear of the store for roughly 4 minutes when I asked him directly what he would do this week. He answered carefully that he could not announce future changes, but advised buying what your household consumes weekly in the largest quantity you can afford and properly store. Not next month. Not after you witness prices shift, because once the new pricing populates the shelf tag, the window has already sealed. I remained motionless beside my half-filled cart and then rotated that cart entirely and spent 40 minutes shopping in a completely different mode. That's exactly what I encourage you to execute. An affordable, steady, week-by-week blueprint, absent panic and absent shelf clearing that harms neighbors. This week, prioritize coffee and olive oil in the bulkiest format available because they have back-end cost increases locked in and long shelf longevity. Over the next 2 weeks, target ground beef and eggs, with ground beef portioned and frozen and eggs frozen using the ice tray method for extended supply. During weeks 3 and 4, concentrate on packaged foods that are part of your exact household rotation like cereals, sauces, crackers, and soups. Secure 2 months' supply, nothing exotic or unfamiliar. Weeks 5 and 6, address seafood and orange juice. Tinned fish for the durable protein reserve. Frozen concentrated orange juice for the immediate term. Fill the remaining gaps systematically. A structured approach. Allocating $100 to $150 weekly. No financial drama. No emptied bank balance. No stripping shelves and disadvantaging fellow shoppers. By June, individuals across the nation will stand in checkout queues staring at receipts that register 30, 40, perhaps 50% heavier than their memory serves. They will be furious. They will cast blame on corporations. They will broadcast complaints online and demand explanations. But you will possess knowledge they lack. The determinations behind those prices were cemented months ago in corporate boardrooms. The supplier notifications were dispatched. The pricing directives filtered down from headquarters. The store manager absorbed the intelligence and remained publicly silent. But he confided in me. And I've conveyed it to you, and you've acted upon it. That isn't fear. That isn't accumulation for accumulation's sake. That is simply comprehending what's arriving before it materializes and executing one calm, intelligent stride ahead of it. We don't panic, we position. Drop a comment immediately and tell me which of these 7 you're securing first this week. I genuinely read every single one. And if you want the complete, exhaustive breakdown, precise quantities per household member, optimal storage vessels, the rotation methodology I personally operate at home, hit subscribe right now because that video is already in production and it's arriving next week. Share this with a single individual, just one. A partner, a parent, a sibling, a trusted friend, someone who deserves awareness before it broadcasts on the evening news. Stay sharp, remain ahead, and I'll see you in the next one on my channel.